We're going to have a look at our strawberries today. This is part 7 of our grow along, and today we're going to look at cutting them back now that it's the end of the season, and also feeding them. So the first thing I'm going to look at doing is removing these runners that are going all along the side of the bed and onto the floor. We're just using a pair of scissors today for all of this, and they're all going to go into the compost. Some of them, as you can see, have actually rooted into the wood chip below as well, so you could leave some if you wanted to. And then we're going to find each of our plants, grab around the bottom, and we're looking at cutting around sort of 2 inches above the plant. And I'm going to remove all of these leaves. My strawberries are obviously in raised beds. However, if yours were on the ground and you've got a mower that goes to a high enough setting, you could just take the mower over these, as long as it's not going to damage the actual crown. Remove any slugs or snails that you find as you do this as well. Luckily there isn't many in this one for me. You want to remove any of the old brown leaves that are sat on the floor in their stems too. So that's the bed all chopped back now, and it can look quite drastic, but there'll be new leaves that come up from these pretty soon. I've got a bit of a nest going on in there, and then we also want to now look at where each of our plants are planted and whether or not some of these are runners. So this is where I've planted these, and then I've got a runner here, so I just want to remove any additional ones. If we have them planted too close together, it's just not going to help us in the long run to keep getting plenty of fruit out of these. You can see each of these crowns have multiplied as well, so that's not something we're going to look at doing at the moment. They'll be absolutely fine like that, but that is one of the reasons why we do in the end look at replanting the beds and separating them, or what most people do is take the runners to make new beds from instead. And then the next thing we're going to do is look at topping the bed with some feed. This is the feed that I'm using today. It's called Bio Bloom. It's manure based, so that's why I'm putting it on at this time of the year. If, however, you're using a compost, then I would wait until February or March to feed your bed. This is simply just because we don't want any very wet winter to wash too many nutrients out of the bed before it's ready to start blooming again, whereas this will have plenty of time to continue breaking down. So I'm simply going to be topping around 1 inch onto the top of this bed and leaving a bit of a space around the plants, just so it's not touching. It can cause some issues if it is touching too much, and it will obviously water in towards it a little bit, but it can just be a bit too rich initially. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a firm down and shake any that are on the plants off a little bit. I have added a little bit more in the corners where the bed's a little bit low as well. Now it's all looking neat, and this should give us plenty of food now for the plants to produce well next year. We don't actually need to worry about covering the bed. We're going to have a quick look at the runners that we potted up a while ago. So my plan with these was to sell them and give them away, but I haven't actually managed to put them out with all the cold weather and things. So they've been in a pot, which has been quite tall, hence the leaves have got so high. But we're going to do pretty much the same with these as we have the other, and we're just going to cut off the top few inches and any of the browning leaves as well. And then one thing that you can do with this at this point, you could leave it in the pot if you are happy with them being like that and you're likely to plant them at some point. You could also plant them in any area where your strawberries haven't done very well or you want a few more. And then what I'm going to do with these today is actually pop them on into a larger pot. So I'm going from this side to a litre. Just going to pop a little bit in the bottom because we've got to remember that we still don't want this crown to be deeper in the pot. So make sure you don't bury them too far down. And then they should be absolutely fine in this pot now all winter. And then we could either make a new strawberry bed with them, give them away, or sell them if you wanted to. And then we'll give them enough of a water, and then they can sit outside. They don't need to be in under any protection or anything like that. So when it comes to our hanging baskets or any strawberries that we have in pots, what we're going to do is exactly the same as before, where we're removing the old leaves. These are a different variety, so I'm not able just to take a handful and cut them. I'm going to go round and cut them and leave some of the greener leaves, but cut off any of the older leaves that are no longer needed. And then exactly the same as I have done before, we're just going to top dress this with about an inch of this manure based product. I'm going to give a little bit of spacing still around the crowns. These crowns are a little bit lower, and also we don't want to cause any burning or issue with the plants. There we go, that looks a lot better and a lot tidy. We won't need to look at these now again until spring, and we'll be looking at dealing with the leaves again. These strawberries have been in this hanging basket now for about 2 years. If yours have been in there longer, then it is worth thinking about taking the runners from them and making sure that you keep up the productivity by renewing and having some new baskets started next year, because they will run out of steam at some point, and being in pots or baskets, that's going to happen quicker than it will in the ground as well. If you're feeding with compost rather than a manure-based product, then one option would be to sprinkle a little bit of bloodfish and bone over it, or to give it a good liquid feed and then add the compost in the spring rather than now, to make sure that we still have plenty of food on them. If you want some earlier strawberries than you would have otherwise, and you have an indoor space, and this has to be an unheated space, strawberries need a period of cold to stratification period in order to produce well the next year. But if you have an unheated polytunnel or greenhouse, or some of the small flexi tunnels, then you could just pop these in there, making sure they are still getting to the cold weather, and then they'll give you just a few weeks earlier harvest than they would do previously. So these are going to hang in my polytunnel and go on some shelves in the little flexi tunnels for me.